The EyeToy. Everyone's favourite early 2000s peripheral that no one really thinks about anymore. A brief explanation if you don't happen to know what it is. The EyeToy was a webcam for the PlayStation 2, released in 2003. Kind of like an early version of Xbox's Kinect, it utilised motion for gaming purposes. Basically, you yourself would be the controller for a slew of minigames that would become available. It was manufactured by Logitech and later Namte, but while video chatting was never its intended use, unofficial webcam drivers were developed for Windows and Linux if you're really that desperate for a $20 cam. The reason I'm making this video, however, is because I never owned one during its prime. I may have tried the games at some point while at a friend's or relative's house, but my unit was purchased secondhand extremely cheaply sometime in the last 10 years. It's been sitting in a drawer ever since, and I was curious how it holds up today. I don't even know if it works, so let's plug this bad boy in and see what happens. I've collected a small collection of compatible games as I've found them in charity shops and the like, although 25 titles were released in total. The ones I bought, however, only cost several dollars each. You'll regularly find them untouched in the wild, relegated to shelves full of the Sims and the FIFAs of the world. Let's start with the first EyeToy play, which, as far as I can tell, was the very first title released for the camera. What I would find to be its main issues became apparent almost immediately. 1. Its ability to handle lighting, and 2. How sensitively it perceives motion. Ooh, is it supposed to be that overblown? Oh, it's because of that light. I think somehow I chose English by moving around. Most of these games don't allow a controller at all. It's all camera based, and your body is the controller. Regardless, before you play, you have to sit through a video with granny humour explaining how the EyeToy works. The main takeaways are that you need to be well lit because it's an antiquated webcam from the early 2000s. The camera includes a manual focus ring, and the way you skip things is by completely covering the lens with your hand. After a quick setup, I decided to rearrange the room's lighting and the camera angle so you can actually see what I'm doing. I immediately had issues selecting menu items, but finally, we could try some gameplay. God, it must look so dorky. But that's okay, I run a YouTube channel about retro gaming. Being dorky is okay. So, first impressions? Well, honestly, I was quite surprised. It picked up my flailing appendages accurately enough, and I was indeed having fun as the box art promised. Crab dance. Yeah, crab dance. This game involves me whacking the speakers as CDs fly towards them, for good, unknown reasons I'm sure. As I said, it was enjoyable, but did outstay its welcome. How long does this go on for? Oh my god. Not trying to infer I'm unfit or anything, but the constant movement was surprisingly tiring. I was gonna go for a run today, but then, I didn't. I came home and drank beer instead. Just, and yeah, maybe I didn't need to go for a run. Although, maybe I do.
I knew you had rhythm.
Covered in cat hair too. Nothing but professionalism. Oh, can I play something else? That kind of sucked. Do the games get better than this? I get that it doesn't look that laborious, but little did I know that future games would have me working a lot harder for the goal. Next, I tried a minigame where you bounce a ball on your head. It became apparent here that not all games shared the same camera angle. Making me move back even further away. Oh no, it's different for every game. It was here I demonstrated some granny humour of my own. This is good for showing different angles. I can't even reach the start button. This is good for showing different angles of my game room. There we go. Oh, I just stepped on a power cable. Ouch. It's somewhat responsive. I say somewhat, it is actually pretty responsive, to be fair. Like, it obviously feels a little bit floaty and maybe the collision is a little bit off. But overall, first impressions aren't too bad. It just hurts my neck a little bit. I'm sorry if I'm going out of frame here. This is a bit unpredictable, to be honest. Game over. That was kind of exhausting. Good thing I have some fuel. I then tried some other mini games. I don't get it. And made some shocking revelations about technology that's 2 decades old. Alright, so I've noticed as I'm in space! I've noticed as I've been walking around the room, like rearranging the camera and stuff, it's accidentally been selecting these menu options and whatnot. So, something to note, it is a bit sensitive. I don't think it truly knows it's my hand. I think it just sees movement and it just assumes it's your hand. Alright, already not really liking this much. I struggled with the menus a bit more. Don't really get how to use this menu option. It works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. Slapstream, sure, let's give that a go. What could go wrong? Whinged about the length of the tutorials. The tutorials could be a bit quicker, they just sort of, I don't know, they just go on a bit. Don't really need a whole backstory, I just want to play some fun mini games. I slap you. Alright, here we go, now we're talking. But most importantly, played some games. Slap you, I'm going slap happy! They were fun, although repetitive after only a short period. The core mechanics are only capable of so much, that being waving body parts around. But it was time to move on and see what else was out there. Compatible games were released over a 6-year period after all. Alright, day 2, and for that we're trying the sequel to EyeToy Play, aptly named EyeToy Play 2. So yeah, I sort of put my neck out a little bit playing that game where I was bouncing the soccer ball on my head, so yeah, I had to have some recovery. But now we're trying newer, more interesting things. So okay, off to a good start. Try and get to the right language. How does this work? Why are they going to make this so hard? Straight away, I again encountered issues selecting options in the menus. I know I'm pretty dense, but I don't get this. Just let me play. I don't know, anyway. Oop, my head just selected something. Oh well. It's probably like a really obvious way for me to do this, but it's... Oh, you gotta wave your hand. Could have told me that at the start. Probably did, I just wasn't listening. Well, I'm waving my hand. I started with a boxing game, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out style. This is a bit of worrying hand motion, but whatever gets the job done. Straight away, you can tell the production values have been turned up a notch. There are cleaner, crisper graphics with more interesting angles. Overall, a more polished experience, although the fidelity of the motion controls more or less feels the same. Don't get up. Learn from your last mistake. Oh, coming back for more, are we? No worries, mate. Yeah, probably like how I fight in real life. There's also a cool feature that takes a victory photo at the end. We'll get a game photo. Nice. That's a good feature, I like that. Plays right into my vanity. Following that, I played a baseball game that was probably the most demanding yet. As an Australian, I can admit I know sweet all about the sport, but even I got the gist of whacking the ball and going for a bit of a run. I didn't expect how literal of a recreation the game expected, however. Hell yeah! Yeah. Oh no! I'm Australian, I don't know what the hell baseball is. It's a homer! Why don't I get to run? The rest of the games I tried were more or less the same. Not many brought new ideas to the table. You were either moving just your hands to select or grab something, or you were more or less doing the same thing but with your entire body, although these minigames were usually much more awkward. Interestingly, there is an extras section, just like special features you'd find on DVDs, if you will. EyeToy, trademark, lets you use the EyeToy as a really lame security camera. Set off by motion, like the cheapo TP-Link whatever's facing down my driveway, it can either be triggered and set off an alarm, or be completely silent and black out the screen, stealthily taking photos of anyone who sneaks past. You could even set a time lapse if you really have trust issues. I can't imagine anyone ever used this seriously, at least not for the long term. A switched on PS2 roaring about isn't exactly subtle, but it's a cool extra feature nonetheless. Another feature allows you to record brief video messages. This was my first and only time hearing what the microphone was capable of, and honestly, it's not that bad. Not exactly up to today's standards by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly comprehensible. I've heard a lot worse from the era. Hello me, I'm recording on a 20-year-old webcam designed for the PlayStation. Nice. Lastly, there's the playroom. While there's no gameplay per se, this is where the developers stored experimental examples of what they were working on. This submarine game figures out where my head is, for instance. While I struggled to get the stuff specifically based around colour to work, it turns out there's not much in my house brightly coloured, I was impressed by the cutout cam. Using technology that's similar to what you'll find in video conferencing software today, the EyeToy did a surprisingly good job of masking me out of the background in real time. Sure, part of the shelf and a random piece of the ceiling came along for the ride, but considering it was in the experimental section of a game from 2004, I was still impressed. Lastly, there's a feature called Cameo that's possible by a piece of software called Digimask. The idea is that a photo taken of your face can be mapped onto a 3D avatar. This was later used in quite a few games, well into the era of the PS3 and Xbox 360, but this appears to be the first time it was shown in a commercially released product. However, while the creation process went smoothly, once I hit create, it got stuck on this screen. While it didn't freeze, I gave up after 20 minutes and didn't feel like going through the creation process again. Regardless, I'll show an example of how good this software is in a supported game later in the video. Moving on, let's see what EyeToy Play 3 brings to the table. I'll speed through these a bit quicker because I respect you. I started with another physically demanding game called Boot Camp. I guess Sony was concerned with the health of their gamer base. But hey, still 2 years before Wii Fit. That's notable. Otherwise, games are much the muchness, just differing from the two previous releases. Most of the time, the same gameplay ideas get rehashed over and over, but feature in differing visual ways. You're either pointing, grabbing, or moving a thing with your body. I'm not surprised this was the final release of the Play series. I did notice tech from Play 2 on some games, however. Here's me as a bowling ball. Finally! Speaking of the Playroom, Play 3 does include its own version. This showcases new tracking effects created by hand movement, some of them looking right at home in a King Giz music video. There was also this cool head swapping feature, much like what was popular on Snapchat 7 or so years ago. This is a bit more rudimentary, but works well enough considering the hardware and time period. Another interesting feature is the Recog Cam. The idea is that the camera will recognize certain images and unlock content. I did find some images online, but could only get one to work off my phone's screen. I was too lazy to print them out. It unlocked this surprisingly high quality trailer for an EyeToy game solely based around fitness called EyeToy Kinetic. This was released in 2005, still 2 years before the Wii Fit, if that's any kind of reference for you. Besides the main Play series, there's a laundry list of games that more or less include the same gameplay elements, rehashed with differing visual elements. Personally, I own EyeToy and an Ape Escape themed collection called Monkey Mania. Yes, they expanded the EyeToy element from Play 2 into an entire game. Unfortunately, however, my experience wasn't positive at all. I struggled with the most basic part of the game, selecting the menu options. The selection areas were just too big. I kept accidentally selecting the wrong thing and just kinda gave up after a short period. Shame really, this would have been right up my alley as a young James Bond fan. Hell, even as a late 20-something James Bond fan. Well, except for No Time to Die. That sucked. I did discover a high resolution mode, however. Brace your pixels. The resolution was now 320 by 240 pixels. Heck yes! To be fair, it is double the usual resolution and looks considerably better if it's any consideration, but the frame rate does struggle. Moving on, I'm a big fan of the Ape Escape series, so I was keen to give Monkey Mania a go, but it was much of the same as the Play series, just of cute little cheeky monkeys. You can see it in my body language and face. I'd had enough. The novelty had well and truly worn off, so I decided to leave it at that. Before I wrapped things up, however, I was curious how the EyeToy was featured in more traditional games. Again, there is a laundry list of supported games, this time given the label Enhanced with EyeToy. One such game I own is Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. Within, you can create a custom skater with your ugly mug using the cameo feature I failed to get going earlier. It worked here, but with interesting results. Horrifying results, some might say. The mustache is nice and prominent, so I'm a fan of that, but otherwise I wouldn't class this as very flattering. Let's never speak of it again. So, final thoughts. Does it hold up? Well, surprisingly, yes, in a way. But you have to be into it. Even years later, this same technology gets boring fairly quickly. Tech innovation can't improve the core novelty by much. Having said that, 10 million EyeToys were sold, so people were evidently into it. They didn't have the lasting appeal of the Wii or the Kinect. Those arguably don't have lasting appeal in 2022 either, but it feels like they were in the human zeitgeist for a bit longer. 10 million is a lot, but I'm sure plenty of those 10 million webcams have been sitting unused in drawers around the world for years. Mine would have cost less than $5 or I probably wouldn't have bought it. Regardless, I'm glad I gave it a go. I'm sure it will be fun to pull out when friends are around, but otherwise, there isn't much room for a device like the EyeToy in 2022.